Welcome back to the Passion for Craft podcast. We are talking about North Bennet Street School today. What do you think, Brent?
We have purposely not talked since he came to town because we wanted to share it with you guys what's
Save
going
it for
on.
the podcast.
But this is an exciting new chapter, right?
Why is it exciting? What's going on?
Richard's gone. Richard said
That's why it's exciting?
Yes, Richard's gone.
He's kidding.
We're going to miss him, but we are getting to get a witness in the making of an apprentice and what an apprentice learns. And especially for me, having been there, it's fun to talk about, one of the first things you do at North Bennet Street is you go to Brimfield and you get old hand planes like this. Brimfield is a, antique fair, right?
It's a massive flea market.
Yeah, way out in Connecticut.
There are guys selling tchotchkes there. There are guys who've just cleaned out their garages there. It's got everything.
And it's over like 5 acres or 10 acres or something.
Massive.
And so it's, you're walking forever. Yeah. And so he did that experience. He found some old tools. We'll hear about that. But I mean, this is exciting for me because hopefully excited for the listeners because they get this. A lot of people can't go to North Bennet Street. They're later in their career or they're too early in their career. But what would an apprentice have learned 200 years ago? I think you're having that experience. You're working with hand tools. You're learning about stuff. You're being trained up. And so to get to walk beside you in that adventure, I think I'm excited about, going, oh, yeah, I forgot we did that or whatever it is you're doing. And so, this is awesome.
Cool beans, man. Well, this is fun. So I'll just jump into North Bennet stuff. I'm excited. I think for me, this is the first time I was kind of doing some reflecting. This is the first time I've walked home from school and been like, okay, I can't wait to go back there tomorrow. And I can't wait to, do this next piece. There have been some days where it's like, ugh. But, everything that we're doing has so much purpose to it, and so much stuff behind it. So we're
purpose,
well, why are you I think a lot of people would look into the program and say, why are you taking an old tool and restoring it? This is a woodworking class. You spent the first 3 weeks of the woodworking class metalworking essentially and taking an old hand plane like this and stripping it down and then taking all these individual pieces. That's corrugated bottom. That's really nice.
It's a bedrock.
Awesome.
It's a Stanley bedrock. It needs to be restored.
Yeah, I'd happily take this up and do it if you
should.
want.
Yeah.
Okay. This is awesome. Okay, cool. Well, sorry. But so we're taking an old tool like this, like similar condition to this, actually worse condition than this was mine. The bottom was completely rusted out. Mine actually had a grid-shaped pattern on it from the wire little mesh thing that it was sitting on at the basement of someone's house. And we're stripping it down. We're sanding it down. We're spending, multiple hours sanding the bottom of our planes to get them level.
To get them flat.
And anyway, throughout that process, we're learning so much about the tool. We're learning so much about restoration as a whole. And it's not just, why wouldn't you just go out and buy a nice Lee Nielsen plane or a Veritas plane, which are awesome planes, and I would love to have one. But at the same time, we are intimately getting to know our tools better. We're intimately able to say, oh, I know what's wrong with this. I remember when I restored this piece of it. We're just seeing all the parts of it. And it's putting you in this preservation mindset where even the tools that you're using to restore old buildings, we want to restore everything. And Steve is our professor, Steve O'Shaughnessy. We're hoping to have him as a guest. He's awesome. He
went through the program too.
He did. He's a graduate. But he's been teaching there for the past, I want to say 20 years.
Probably right.
He took over for Robert Adam, who was my dad's instructor.
Exactly.
And so anyway, he's got this preservation mindset. Steve's also done a lot to the program, and we'll hopefully get to hear about it from him himself. But even just making it to where craftsmen leave North Bennet Street ready to go into the workforce, not necessarily just ready to preserve, ready to go work at museums, which has been a little bit of the historical feedback that they've gotten from North Bennet Street is, hey, help me learn how to work on a job site. Help me to, do some of these things. And that's some of the modernizations that Steve's brought to it. But he's still keeping a lot of the preservation mindset, which I think is really good. Like taking an old tool. Even a lot of us are like, we just want our new tools or our old tools to shine like they're brand new. And Steve's like, well, I kind of like Steve's the kind of guy who would take this handle and you can see the handle's kind of beat up and notched. And some people would say, oh, we've got a lathe. I'd go turn a new handle on the lathe. I'd love to just, make this brand new. And Steve's like, no, this is a great handle. It tells stories, of like, look at who's owned this thing. Look at, the marks on the, anyway.
One of the things that's interesting to me when I'm hearing you talk.
Yeah.
And and you're talking about restoring these planes. Basically, if you took this plane, and the fact that he noticed that it was a corrugated bottom. The corrugated bottom was basically to make it, run across the board.
Less surface tension.
Less surface tension. Thank you. And so,
surface friction.
Yeah, the corrugated bottom was a design feature that they did in their planes, and it made them a more efficient tool. But if I took this plane and I rubbed it, what you do is you get a very flat surface, and what we did was we glued emery paper down onto a board, and then if I rub this plane on the bottom, you might see a bright spot here and a bright spot here, and you'd realize that the bottom of this plane is not flat.
It's actually warped over time.
It's actually been warped over time, and you were never supposed to keep your planes like this. You're supposed to keep your planes on the side, right? So I don't do that anymore because these aren't users necessarily. The point I'm trying to make is that there is a level of precision that you're learning in craft by working on an old tool that, the shaving that's going to come off of this plane can be a 64th of an inch, or less. And so when you are removing a 64th or less at a time, and you are, smoothing things up and straightening things up with that level of precision, there isn't a tool today, like even a chop saw, when you push the board against it and you try to just take this very little amount. There's a different level of precision here when you use hand tools. And
totally.
So when you talk about practicality, you are talking about, what I remember getting out of North Bennet Street was that everybody had a job. Mm-hmm. If you wanted one, the consensus in the field was good contractors in Boston would be like, oh, you went to North Bennet Street, you're hired.
Yeah.
And so...
Still the consensus today, by the way. A lot of instructors there have contracting businesses on the side or have really good connections with those contractors and plug you right in with them. And especially if your instructor's vouching for you as well, just saying, hey, this guy's great, go on.
So, the practical side of what you're doing, one, you are trained you're being trained different. And maybe the point of this podcast is to really, okay, so what's different? Like if I went to a job site or if I started, woodworking, and I bought a chop saw and I started figuring it out, and I redid my bathroom, and you get into it and you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference between that guy after 5 or 10 years and you after 2 years, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is we're talking about this guild system a lot. I think that's the biggest thing. I am an apprentice. I'm truly an apprentice right now, and it's funny that you're like, I want to hear from the apprentice. That never would have been said historically. It would have been like, go sweep the shop, go watch what I'm doing. It never would have been, let's just sit down and listen to an apprentice. But it is so foreign a concept now that we have apprenticeships that I think it is interesting to get to hear from an apprentice and what we're learning and how we're learning it. So unfortunately we had someone drop from our program, and one of their frustrations with the whole program was how nothing was concrete. There was, and I didn't speak to him after they left, but we just gathered some things over what they said during the time there. And, but essentially there was frustration with, how little was given at a time. And it feels very Mr. Miyagi, the way that we're being taught things. Like for example, like just to give you the timeline, we started class and, we're getting like, so essentially I've think about it like this. So there's like this circle of things. We're starting right here, and there's a point over here we need to get to. There's a point over here we need to get to. Point over here, point over here, point over here. And our instructors kind of starts walking down the path of one and then stops entirely. And then we start walking down a path of another and then stops entirely. And so there's never like a finished point necessarily, but there are these little pieces of wax on, wax off. Can you do this? We're going to pause here. Now we're going to move into this. And so 4 weeks into the program now, we have just started our first woodworking project. My blades have just touched wood for the first time in 4 weeks. And so just as a side story, my wife has been making fun of me because I bring home wood shavings that I think are really cool that I've planed off.
The curled up wood shavings.
Yeah, the curls of, because when you have a really sharp blade, you can get a really nice curl, and they can be really thin, and they curl up really tight, and it's really fun.
When you use this plane and you run it across the wood, this little spinner,
there's a blade, and then there's a plane rake,
and it'll take a very thin piece of wood, and it naturally just curls off. And so, anyway, that's what he's talking about.
Just as you're shaving along, the wood just curls up, and it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's fun.
It's a really satisfying deal. A couple of my classmates have been talking about making an ASMR channel on YouTube of just wood planing for hours.
What's ASMR?
I don't know, but it's like sensory.
The sound of
the sound of the plane. You see these curls come off, these beautiful curls. So, if anyone wants to steal the idea, I mean, I think it would be great, ASMR planing for an hour to listen to, relax to, sleep. Yeah, it's beautiful. Anyway,
that's funny.
So we get to the program, and they start talking about architectural styles, and it's like very broad, very overview. And then he stops, and we're like, middle of the day. Then he jumps in the next part of the day, and he goes, "Okay, we're going to start going over your tool list." And one of the things that's different about the Preservation Carpentry program at North Bennet Street versus all the other programs is in a lot of the other programs, you buy your tool bundle. You spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on a bundle of tools. And so as I was buying...
Be like a Milwaukee pack-out system.
Pack-out system. They've filled the pack-out system with other tools that they think you'll need, Starrett squares, whatever it may be that you're plugging into this system. And so I bought my tool pack, and my tool pack was like $384 or something. And it was a drafting board. It was drafting supplies, and that was it. And so I was looking at the breakdown of my tool list, and I was like, this can't be all of our tools. I was like, but maybe they just give them to us when we're there. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So essentially, Steve said, we're going to talk through your tool list. So he hands us out this sheet of paper that we've never seen before. That's every single one of the tools that we're expected to have for the class. And he goes, now the reason we do it this way, and we don't just give you a Milwaukee pack out, is because we want you to have like an intimate knowledge of what tools you're getting. We want you guys to have the freedom to go get whatever tools you want to get. But we'll recommend some. There are going to be some that I say, you have to have this. And so one of those being a Starrett square, he was like, they're just unbelievably accurate. You need to have square. You need to, we can't be messing around with that.
Back to that precision thing that we were talking about, that I was talking about.
Yeah.
The Starrett square, I remember Robert said the same thing. You got to have a Starrett square.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? He goes, because it's square.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, most of those Stanley squares or the other ones, they're not square. And you're like, what? And so there's the thing where you put the square on the edge of the table and you strike a line, and you're actually able to see whether it's really square. And it's shocking how many of them aren't. Well, it's shocking of them that they're not square.
We've been taking our Starretts, and you basically make it to have the square right angle, and we put another square kind of right up next to it,
like a competing square,
like a competing square, and it just goes. It rocks, just the slightest little rock in the Starrett. And one of the things, so when we went to Brenfield, everyone saw the price of the Starrett square because it's like a $150 tool. It's not an inexpensive tool. Natalie was really happy to see that come up on our charges. But we essentially got our Starretts, and we got the Starretts that we found at Brimfield, and we put them together, and you're just like, fingers crossed, come on, like, please be straight, be square. And then you hear that little, you can see the 1/64 of an inch that it's off in between.
Wait. You said you take the Starrett and then you take the one you got at Brimfield and they're...
So we took Steve's Starrett and his
Steve,
was true.
Yeah.
And then we had the one that we didn't know whether or not it was truly square or not.
And it wasn't square?
And we put it up against and you could feel it rock and you're like... And he's like, Steve's looking at it. He's like, this is probably like a 32nd off. No, it's a 64th off. And he's just eyeballing these things. He's like, yeah, it's a 64th off. You could probably get by with that one. And a couple of us are like, myself included, mine was about a 64th off. And Steve said, you're probably good to go if it's a 64th off. You're not going to be measuring things like that intensely. You know it's a little bit off. You know it's not perfect, but you're going to be all right. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to sit there and know.
My OCD is going to kill me.
Right, exactly. And it has been. And me and my benchmate, Ryan, he's the guy who has the bench across from me. He's also a listener and a patron. And that's actually how he got into the school. Is he talked to someone else who's in the Patreon, who's in the Discord, and messaged him and heard about the school and then went there. So
nice.
Shout out Ryan. Same with Kevin too. I don't want to shout both of them out. But anyway, the awesome guys. But Ryan and I were both just kind of like, dang it. We got it. We got to get a square one. So we kind of have our job site square, like more of like a beater square it'll get the job done. And so 64th of an inch at a job site, not the end of the world, but as you're in the shop and as you're at your bench, we have like our precision
So in case
tools.
you haven't noticed, 15 minutes into this thing, Jackson does know something now.
Yeah.
He's no longer, I don't know anything. And
it's
so
weird. I feel like
4 weeks, it's interesting to me that, you talked about the discontinuity of maybe how you're learning and the frustration that person felt.
Yeah.
But I think there is almost a societal, cultural patience you're learning that, like, I remember, and they may have talked about this, the furniture program at North Bennet Street's amazing. They do traditional furniture making and beautiful stuff. The first 6 months in that class, you don't pick up a tool. You are in the drafting and drawing room. And so it's like, you're like, before you can be a master, furniture maker,
gotta be a master drawer.
You got to learn these other things. And so that may have been what frustrated that person.
I think
this
so.
lack of patience with, wait, I just got to trust the system. I got to trust what I'm going to learn here, and realize that you're jumping into an ocean. People probably think you're jumping into a swimming pool of information, only to realize it's an ocean and you can't see the other side, and you're like, wait, now what do I do? And this isn't what I expected.
Oh, totally. I think one of the, just to kind of continue, we're like on this journey, we've done our tool lists and it's taken us like the first week is just to figure out the tool list. And Steve's bringing out his tools to say, this is what this tool looks like, because some of the tools on the list were like what's a marking gauge? I'm like, I have no idea what a marking gauge is. I've never, I know what a drill is. I know what a saw is. I could probably guess what a dovetail saw is, but I don't know what a marking gauge is. I don't know what a marking knife is. And some of these tools that I've worked on a lot of job sites, I think, like working for you. I've swept a lot of job sites, done a lot of demo work. Like I've done a lot of low impact, work that anyone can do. But I've never done some of the more shop work because it takes a higher level of precision.
Yep, exactly.
And even the shop work that I have done, I was making cuts for one of your guys who was doing other stuff. And, so I'm making cuts that aren't high impact cuts and then just sending them off to the other guy to assemble, to actually do the fine detail work. So now I'm doing the fine detail work. And so some of those tools I've never seen before. There was a whole conversation about chisels and all this stuff. So anyway, we get equipped. Thursday, we go to Brimfield. So we go out and we're hunting for these tools, and everyone kind of came away with some tools. Steve gave us each 2 planes. So he gave us one plane that was in really good condition, semi-good condition, or had a chance to be restored to really good condition. So he was like, this could be like an heirloom quality tool, or it already is in really good shape. Here's this tool. And it's donations that have been given to the school and others. And then he gives us this is you're going to be your beater job site, whatever. So we both everyone had 2 planes that we knew we were going to be restoring, but when we went to Brimfield, it was like a madhouse. Everyone's trying to we were looking for this. Everyone was looking for a 78. Very few at Brimfield itself. A lot of planes, not bedrocks. Anyway, so we find our tools. We come back from Brimfield. We also went to another one. It was optional, but we went to Nashua tool sales, tool gating. They open up the backs of their cars.
Yeah.
And so Kevin was one of the guys. We're hoping to have him on as a guest as well. I think he's a great journeyman example of he's a cabinet maker, knows a ton about the craft, but then he's going through North Bennet Street, and one of the I'll let him talk for himself, but he said, I want to elevate my game. That's what I'm here to elevate my game. And so anyway, he's fun. He goes to Nashua. He beat us all there. He like cleaned the place out.
So Nashua is a famous tool auction in New Hampshire, and what happens is it's in the hotel. It's in a Best Western or something.
Yeah, it's in the garage or the parking lot of a hotel.
And basically people toolgate, but basically they're opening up literally their trunks. They're opening up their cars, and they're selling old tools.
Yeah.
And so you end up falling into a subsection of a subsection of a subsection
These
of America.
Dudes had some great tools.
They had some great tools and
gosh.
great knowledge of tools. And so
you go to
Brimfield
awesome. And you could kind of talk to the people and go, I mean, this. You say a couple terms about the plane that you're picking up from their pile of junk, and they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no, we'll go down. I'll cut the price by $20."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, sure." And then you go to Nashua, and you're like, "Would you do any lower?" And the guys are like, "No, I know what that's worth." And it's like it's a completely different conversation. And I bought my Rabbit plane completely, like I barely had to do any work to get it back in a working condition. Like I'm planing it, and I'm like, "Oh, it's straight.
Yeah.
It's not, or flattening it." Anyway, so we got our tools, we came back, and for the next 2 weeks, we were honing our edges of our chisels, of our blades, of everything like that. We're flattening our planes, getting them square.
Learning to sharpen your tools.
To sharpen our tools.
Do you realize how few carpenters out there know how to sharpen a chisel?
Yeah.
I think I've used that as an example before, but it's just like...
You used to say, you know how good a carpenter is by how sharp his chisels are.
How sharp the tools are. And so you guys spent 2 weeks, which really isn't that long, but in outside of the school world, that's a month of Sundays.
I'm just telling you, it's a month of Sundays.
So it's a lot of time for someone to learn how to sharpen their tools, go back and start sharpening all the tools, get everything so it can shave the hair off your arm.
Yeah,
it's just
well, we spent 40 hours, sharpening tool. Like Ryan specifically, he is like a detail guy, and so he literally, like, Steve makes fun of him for it, but everyone else, he's like, Steve's like, the standard, I need you to flatten your planes up to 320 grit sandpaper. And Steve says, as a passing comment, and some of you will want to, go up to 600, maybe even 800. We'll see. And but some people just want to see their faces and their reflection. And so Ryan kind of heard that and was like, I'm going to do that with all my tools. And so he has. He's been, sharpening his up to this crazy high standard, despite like other people in the class kind of walking by him going, that's good. Like, it's
so
flat,
just
it's
so you
good.
know, now I feel like I'm in your role here because you're talking about things that you realize maybe people don't understand.
That's good. You should do that.
So basically, when you sharpen it, what is the paper? 120?
Yeah,
you
sorry.
start at 120?
No.
You start at?
Yeah, we start at like 40.
Oh, you do?
Well, so basically they've machined now, like instead of picking a flat surface like back in your day, they've machined these pieces that are perfectly flat.
Okay.
And they're these massive pieces of metal. They're like 20 pounds a piece. And so you're like setting these like long things down on your bench, and they're too wide so that you can put 2 grits of sandpaper on it side by side, and these sandpaper grits come in these rolls.
So when you go to just through in context, if you go to Home Depot and buy sandpaper, it probably is 60, maybe 80, but usually the rough one starts about 80.
Yeah.
And then when you get up into 120, it's pretty smooth. 240, you're at 240, 320, you're almost polishing wood. Okay.
100%.
And so
it's all about the fineness of the sand. I don't know what the actual 320, whatever that grit is measuring. It's like specific. Do you know what it's measuring?
No,
But essentially, the higher the number go, like basically when you're going across a 40, you can see these lines go across the surface of your tool.
You can see the texture in the sandpaper.
Yes, and you can. But then as you go higher and higher up, on the 400 grit sandpaper, you rub your finger along it, you can't really tell that it's a gritted surface.
I mean, they polish glass with like 600 and 800 grits, and probably more than that, 3,000 grits.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he's talking about polishing it to 600 or 800. He's talking about the fineness of the paper, so that this bottom of this thing is going to be reflective.
It shines. Yeah, it's reflective at the end. So like this is what mine started as.
A lot of pitting.
But a lot of pitting, and so you're sanding through that pitting, and so a lot of us started like the school provided 80 grit. We bought out independently 40 and 60 grit. Or I guess Ryan bought out 40 and 60 grit, and everyone's kind of been using that to really scrape past the pitting, because what you're doing is you're removing that layer. And so then as you continue up the gritting, you mark with Sharpie across the surface of your tool so that you can see how far down you've sharpened, and you can see, like Brent was saying earlier, those high spots and those low spots, so you know if you're applying even pressure across the plane or if one of your sides is just higher and you're cutting down through it. So anyway, we spent forever doing that. Then we get on the grindstones and we're grinding all of our things. And so Steve pulls out this old piece of paper that was Robert Adam drew all over this piece of paper. And you're sharpening your chisels you're grinding your chisels down to a 27.5 degree angle. And we're like, so we're talking to some of the other people in the class who have done like woodworking before, and some are like, yeah, I always use like 35. Like my chisels are at a 35. My bench planes are like a 30. Like they all just kind of have different ones. We don't even know the reason why it's 27.5, but Steve is required that we grind all of ours down to 27.5 degrees for the angle that it cuts into the wood. For whatever reason, for chisels and for plane irons, which are this thing right here.
So my understanding was the reason why you always did that was because, and you would change that angle based on whether you're working with hardwoods or softwoods. And so the hardwood would be you would want a steeper angle.
Yeah.
Whereas a softwood, it could be.
It's not going to bend the blade.
Right. It's not going to bend the blade.
So essentially, if you can see it, it's this. Here, I'll take the plane rake off of it. But you've essentially got this flat of your blade, and this side, it's maybe hard to see, but this side is essentially flat. And then this side starts flat, but then it goes to this beveled edge. And that beveled edge is what we're talking about. We're getting it to a 27.5 degree, angle from that flat side over here. And we sit at a grindstone and we're grinding this thing out, and it's, stripping it down, and you're grinding it until you can't see a flat on this blade surface anymore. And if you can see any reflection, it's flat, and it takes forever to grind down, but then you finally get it down, and it's, comes together really nicely. And one of the guys who had done woodworking before was like, I've never sharpened my tools like this before. Like I just, bought a Veritas whatever, and then got it, started using it, and I just figured it was fine. But now it's like a completely different ball game. Using sharp tools is
it's you're kind of geeking out on some pretty specific things here, pal. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
it's really cool. It
is cool, and I guess I'm trying to, for people who aren't in your world, and me, who's
a good plan.
Who's been there,
smart.
right? You're talking about the angle of your blade grind here,
awesome.
And so it's
stuff. Yeah, that's too much. Yeah,
it's a little far.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, anyway, so he finishes doing that. We learn all our tools, and then, as we stop, we've grinded out all our tools. He jumps in. All right, now we're going to draft. And so we spend 3 days drafting. And so he's like, before you build anything in this class, you're going to have a fully drawn, at a scale, not at a scale, drawing of whatever you're building. And so we're doing these oilstone boxes. And so we finished the drafting early last week, or early, this Monday we finished it. And so this Tuesday, 4 weeks into the class, was the first time that our planes have touched wood, and we've actually cut wood in this class. That is Preservation Carpentry.
Think about it from another perspective, is that you're learning to have sharp tools.
Yeah.
Right. You're learning to design and craft, and before you build anything.
Look,
right.
I'm not
feels
complaining.
like you've gone all these different directions, but it's just like,
we're trying to make this whole circle. You know what I mean? Like that is Preservation Carpentry. And one of the we've done some field trips as well. And one of the things that Steve has said is, a lot of times the preservation carpenters are masters of a lot of things, but they are preservation carpenters. And so we're going to learn how to paint with linseed oil, and we're going to learn how to do stonemasonry and like lay limestone mortar. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff that we're like going to learn how to do that paint this restoration picture. Anyway, I'm very excited about what the class is. This is the first time I've felt like, I get to go back tomorrow and, bring
That's
my
cool.
little lunchbox. And I mean, it's great. It's a great day learning stuff. And, Steve made the comment the other day, I really don't want to make you guys do the same thing all day. And it was the day that we had started working on our boxes, and everyone's like, no, we're here for this. This is like exactly what we want to do.
It's exciting for me, right? And to watch that and remember all of that stuff. And so this is a great first part of the journey. Okay, we want to thank ViewRail for their sponsorship for this episode.
ViewRail, if you don't know what it is already, it's America's leading manufacturer of floating stairs and a modern cable or glass railings.
They handle every part of the process: design, engineering, manufacturing, delivery, and installation.
And if you believe it, they've got a 10-year structural and finish warranty on all products installed by a ViewRail certified technician.
Nearly all components are made in-house, giving you more control over style, materials, finish, budget, and timeline.
All products are designed as modular, integrated systems that are engineered for easy installation. It's like putting together an erector set.
So thank you, ViewRail. We appreciate you sponsoring our podcast.
So this is one of the thoughts that I had. So now I've kind of shared literally every detail of exactly what we've done, probably in too much detail. But what do you remember kind of from your first little bit of getting to North Bennet Street School? Is the experience similar? Is it different? Like what are your thoughts on hearing all this? Are there spots where you're like, I really hated doing this part of the program, I really enjoyed this? Like, what are some things to look forward to, things to not?
It's fun to remember, and you pricked my memory about, precision and, and I've talked about it in the past in some of my videos. I did one probably 2 years ago on a hand plane, why every carpenter should have a hand plane. And I was reminded of that. So when you're saying that stuff, I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is great. But it's my memory was going to Brentfield, finding those tools.
Did you find any cool tools there? No one really came away with cool tools from Brentfield.
No, not necessarily. I think the other thing is I didn't know what tools were cost, and I think it was. I don't think until the second year we went up to that Nashua tool auction, and so we knew a lot more about it then.
The only reason we went up this year is because it had been closed through COVID up until last year.
Interesting. Okay.
And so this was its first reopening, and so all the instructors were like, Nashua's back. We got to go. So
yeah, that's cool. But it's a fun journey learning about these tools. And like, I never saw a Stanley Bedrock. Basically, Stanley came out with the Bedrock, and it's like, so it's a size 6 plane, but they call it a 605.
So the reason these numbers are in place, this was a big confusion amongst a lot of my classmates. It's the catalog numbers. So like Stanley had a catalog of tools that you would buy, and as you're going through, you're like, I want the 4, the 5. And so these bench planes are the early parts of the catalog, and then as it goes up, they've got further classifications within the thing. So like this is a 78, Stanley 78, and a lot of the other tools have taken that Stanley, definitions that they use, and then have started calling their tools that, or colloquially they're known as, oh, that's a 4-plane, or that's a 78.
So I didn't find any cool tools, and it was years before I saw a Bedrock. So it's funny for me, or it's fun for me to think of the tools in there and to have you go, can I take that back? Right, is just like, that's awesome for me, and that's exciting for me, because I think that hopefully it gives you a leg up on just someone to call and be able to say, hey, we're doing this. What do you think about this? Like you sent me those pictures of the Lyman State or wherever you went, and just, hey, we're looking at this. And I said, what is that, about 1800s? And you're like 1790s. I said, okay.
Well, you were right guessing 1800s, because the photos that I actually sent you were Victorian.
Yeah, I wondered about that.
They weren't. But it's a federal.
They was raised panels.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Yeah. So basically, this Lyman Estate's beautiful estate. It was owned by one family, the Lyman family. They had like 150 to like 500 acres. I can't remember the number. It was high. They now own 30% of it, 35 acres. Anyway, but the whole point is, throughout the generations of the family, as the styles changed, they actually did renovations on the house, and so it was a Samuel McIntyre home but then they
Oh, I see.
they
Interesting.
took pieces apart, and there were like news articles like the family's ruining this historic home in like the
interesting.
1850s, 60s. They're like, no, we preserved this one room as a Samuel McIntyre original room, but
It's fun for me to hear that. I think the times where I was like, what are we doing? We spent a lot of time restoring timber frame barns, and basically taking a timber like that one over in the corner that has a rotted thing out, and cutting out and notching in and doing that work was tedious to me. But I ended up building a curved panel jam and doing some cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
That I loved and I thought was awesome. And so I think the problem is I remember, as you get sucked into that world like you are sucked into it now, and you start having conversations about stuff that you may never have again. Just realize that you're in a you're in a bubble where you guys are talking about bedrock number 6, and you just no one, you'll never have that conversation again.
yeah.
As much as you're having it now. You
Right.
might find some people who really know what they're talking about, but it's a fun time. It's an immersive time. And I always remember, and the thing that sticks with me is that driving to those job sites where we were working in North Bennet Street, and then driving through the new developments and seeing the new houses built and going, okay, something's wrong here, because this is the way we used to build. This is the way we're building now.
Yeah.
There's a problem here. And so that has always stuck with me, is that the pace of what you're learning, the precision of what you're learning, the history of what you're learning versus the throw it together, cheaper, faster culture that we live in. It's jarring, I think that difference.
Okay, awesome. I'm a little nervous now that you say that, because there have been like 2 or 3 people in our class who have said, I'm really excited for timber framing. The whole reason I'm taking this course is for the timber framing part, which is a lot of year 2.
Yeah.
Michael Burry, the teacher who's there, does timber framing. That he used to be a character actor at one of those
Museum villages?
Museum villages, yeah, where he would go in period clothing to whatever and be like timber framing as the day went on.
Michael is an incredible source of knowledge. He's unbelievable. It's interesting. Steve, who runs the program, is a first-year instructor, and Michael is the second-year instructor. For me, Robert, who ran the program, was a second-year instructor, and my first-year instructor was a guy named Dennis Semperbond, who was probably one of the finest craftsmen I'd ever seen.
Is he still around?
Yeah, but the timber framing is good, okay, and that is one of those lost skills, and it's important,
because
and you
everything
need to
is
know
mortise
it.
and tenon and pegs.
Well, when I came back to Texas, if we wanted a timber frame, we had to order it from a timber frame company up in the Northeast. And I remember there's a group down in Waco, but now there's probably 8 timber framers in Texas that you could call, and that Southwest Logs is a company we use that helped us on a barn project. The group out of Waco has helped us with a barn project, and so that is a skill set that is much more prevalent today, and I see us infusing into our projects more than I would have 30 years ago. So timber framing was like, okay, can we quit fixing these freaking logs, right? To now, like, okay, this is really practical.
Yeah. I'm just, basically they cater the class to what everyone wants to do.
Sure.
And so I'm just nervous as more and more people. I would hate to spend, and there's been no evidence that this would be the case, but I'd hate to spend, 6 months out of the year timber framing a house where it's like we could be working on door jams, window sashes.
There's so much.
Stuff like
There's
that.
so many things you pick up. I went and did a YouTube video for the Build Show at one of their sites, the farm that you guys are going to go to, Brookwood Farm, and even just walking through the historic buildings, there's so much information in those things. How moldings used to be made. Anyway, it's just I wouldn't worry about that. There's too much to learn. So as you're discovering.
So one of our projects, I know we're wrapping up here soon, but one of our projects for this year is actually this fall. We're building a shed, like a historic shed. Did y'all ever build sheds? Did y'all do that?
We did a timber frame shed.
Okay. Well, this one won't be timber frame necessarily. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But we're just building a 13 by 20 something shed. That seems bigger than it might be. I don't know. But it's just like a small building that we're putting together. So Steve has picked out a door for us, like a historic door, and we are going to build a house around it.
Nice.
One of the questions I asked Steve was, how can I prepare? Like, what books can I read to get historic precedent or like on this? And he goes, nothing really. And I was like, huh. And we've asked kind of those questions. Like I've heard a couple of our specifically the two guys who are listeners, ask that question of Steve. And he doesn't really always give like a, oh, check out this historic book, check out this, pattern book. This is the precedent for that. Or is there historic precedent for that? He's more of just like an observer in the time period, I guess you would say. So he's just like, yeah, no, this is an 1820s house, and they did this here, rather than like, this is typical of the 1820s. Look at these pattern books. So it's been an interesting experience where I'm just like, huh. So I wanted to ask you, who it seems like you have a more of a bent towards the historic precedent, the pattern books, the things like that. Would there be any things for like a shed? There's a slate roof shed, a copper roof shed, and then a cedar roofed shed.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You would look at to maybe add a little flair onto a building, or
if you look at the quick answer is, I think Steve's right. There's not a book.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at the pattern books and the books that were written at that time, none of them would have been written for building a shed.
Okay.
All right. That's not
doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. It would be like
someone saying, "Where's the pattern book for doghouses?"
Yeah, even though there's kitschy doghouse things that are out there, or how do you build an outhouse, or something like that. It'd be like
it's too functional to have a design thing.
It's I don't think there is a book. What books there would be surveys of historic buildings, right? If you did a survey of outbuildings, and that's what that would be called, is a at like Colonial Williamsburg. I suspect you can find documentation, master's thesis, stuff like that's been written about that. Now, the problem with the one in Colonial Williamsburg would be that they'd be regionally to the Mid-Atlantic,
right?
Building techniques that probably weren't prevalent in Boston. So, but I mean, he's basically walking you guys through, and this is something that we'll talk about when we talk about Master Builder in an upcoming episode. Is that one of the things I learned that kind of give me the eye that I have is understanding historic precedent. And unfortunately, you can only understand historic precedent through experience. And so what he's basically doing is he's taken all the information of the 1810 outhouses that he knows and understands, and knows that there's 6 characteristics that make that an 1810 thing. And it's the way they did, the windowsills, and the size of the clapboards, and just all that kind of stuff. And so he is training you in historic precedent,
right?
And you are beginning that journey. I'm curious, did he hand out any books?
Well, he did refer me to our textbook, which is a carpentry book by Coble. It's called Carpentry by someone Coble. And he basically was just start reading that.
Did he give you a field guide to American houses?
We have that.
We
have that on our list. I
that's
don't
on
have
your
it
list.
yet, but
okay. You do have that, actually.
I do, yeah. Oh, no, actually, he didn't give us that one. He gave us a field guide to timber framing. Yeah. I'll look up our list.
Anyway, because one of the things I remember is that one of the early books they gave us was this book by Virginia McAllister called A Field Guide to American Houses.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know.
And that is a seminal, important book that you and your classmates should read and understand, because it's just like he's saying, if you have a door, and he goes, the door that you're going to build around it.
Yeah.
The same project could be, I give you a 1920s door, an 1880s door, 1810 door, and those sheds would all be different based on those different time periods. And so, the way we constructed in the 1880s was different from 1920s, was different from 1810. And so that's a piece of the learning that probably isn't defined that way, but is a powerful piece of your learning.
The other thing that he says he has said is we'll really cater it to the person who's buying the shed. And so if they have any specific instructions or anything like that, we will make it exactly to specification. But there are only 2 buyers, and there's a third shed that we will be making that no one has bought yet. And the 2 buyers have not given any, specifications of what they're trying to do. So, if you wanted to buy a shed for $6,500 from North Bennet, you're welcome to, and then provide any specifications.
You know that it will be made of all natural materials.
Yep.
You know that it will be built to last.
Yep.
And so as opposed to the $800 shed that is assembled from Home Depot of fake parts and things like that.
To put it into perspective, Steve has said the sheds we will be building, the roofs on these sheds are, copper will last 100 years given, slate will last 100 years, and the slate that we're using will last 300 years. So it's not like these things are going to, fall apart in a day. So
I would encourage you, okay, to make sure you like the slate question. Okay. Mm-hmm. And here's the Monday morning practical thing. Not many people understand what slate is and the difference between 100 versus 300-year-old slate.
Yeah.
And to be able to understand that and explain that and to go purchase that for your client, that's something that's a lost art. That's something that people don't know how to do. There's a lot of paper builders out there, guys who running around in a truck and basically pay the bills and, make sure the guys show up, but who don't know how to build. Mm-hmm. And, I've got a client right now who wants a slate roof or who wanted a slate roof. And we talked through the pros and cons and the maintenance that's involved in the slate roof. And because slate roofs, the slates fall off, right? And so you actually have to go maintain those roofs. He's like, wait. I didn't understand that. Yeah. I don't want to do that. And so, there's Chinese slate that was on the market for a long time that is junk. Mm-hmm. And so why is it junk? Well, why didn't it work? Slate. Yeah. And so anyway, there's just things like that I would encourage you to listen hard on, because that's a conversation we have with our clients quite a bit. Is quality products, quality materials.
Steve actually recommended a book for us when he was going over, these are the roofs we're going to look at. By the way, there's this book called The Slate Roof Bible. I highly recommend it. And I was like, that piqued my interest. So I just bought it on Amazon really fast, and it came in. And I started reading it, and I was like, this is going to be a slog. I'm going to have to. And it's the most readable book.
Yeah,
it's very
that's a great
conversational.
Book.
It's anyway, so I was like, oh, this is kind of fun to learn about slate. It's got all these great pictures in it of beautiful old
the
church buildings
and stuff they did with the sweeps and
oh my gosh,
the slate valleys there's no metal in the valley. And it's
crazy.
It's crazy.
It's really cool. So anyway, I've been enjoying it a lot. That's the North Bennet Street update. I know we're over on time, so we'll cap it there. But there we go.
My outside looking in, because we haven't really talked about this, is it seems like you're energized and excited by it, right? Yeah. You're learning a lot. You're a little overwhelmed, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to know.
So much.
And so, good start.
Solid. And I think the best thing, it's really fun to have these other dudes. Well, everyone, the other people around me. There's a couple girls in our class, but it's a fun class of people who are all pretty like-minded, who are excited about what's what we're learning, and even the person who dropped, no shade on them at all, but the question was posed a couple times, is anyone enjoying this? Is anyone liking this? What's going on here? And everyone's like, this is hard, but it's good. It's like you're saying, the perseverance and the, it's good. We're doing the same thing. And every time we're struggling with something, we're planing the crap out of these irons, it's just oh my gosh, I'm hating this. But it's we're going to love these tools so much more because we've put in the sweat equity in them. We know them more intimately. Anyway, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Good stuff.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.